You lying, cheating fraud. Marla's shrill accusation echoed through my cell phone. I stared in disbelief at the unknown number lighting up my screen, frozen in place on my living room carpet. Excuse me? I finally managed, completely blindsided by the verbal assault from my husband's sister, who I barely knew. Don't play dumb with me, she seethed. I have proof you embezzled over $200,000 from my father's company. Did you really think no one would find out? I sank slowly to the floor as her rant continued, my pulse racing. Embezzlement? What was she talking about? I racked my brain, trying to make sense of the allegations. Sure, I had been helping out a little more with my father-in-law Leonard's struggling financial firm lately, ever since I married Eli 6 months ago. But steal money? Marla, I honestly have no idea what you mean. I pleaded into the receiver. There must be some misunderstanding. She cut me off sharply. Oh, I understand perfectly, and if you think you're getting away with this, you're dead wrong. I'm calling my lawyer and the police, and I swear you'll pay. The line went dead. I stared at my phone in stunned disbelief, Marla's accusations echoing in my mind. Embezzlement? Police? It made no sense. How could she think I was capable of such a thing? My hands shook as I dialed Eli. Desperate to make sense of this madness. It went straight to voicemail. I hung up, remembering with a sinking feeling that he was on a business trip. I was alone, facing Marla's bizarre allegations without anyone on my side. Over the next hour I paced the house, dread and confusion swirling inside me. I knew I had done nothing wrong, but I had no idea how to prove it, or why Marla would make such extreme accusations against me. We barely knew each other. Why would she be targeting me like this? I didn't have to wonder much longer. My phone buzzed with a text from Eli's cousin Jane asking if I was going to Leonard's 80th birthday barbecue that weekend. My heart sank further. If Marla was going to come after me for supposed embezzlement, what better place to confront me than in front of the whole family? I toyed with staying home, not wanting to face public humiliation, but I knew avoiding her would make me look guilty. No, I had to stand up to Marla's outrageous accusations, for myself and my marriage. My hands still shook as I dressed for Leonard's party that Saturday. I chose a conservative navy dress, not wanting to give Marla any more ammunition against me. As I drove to Leonard's sprawling estate, my nerves mounted, but I refused to be intimidated. I had done nothing wrong, and I would make Marla see that, even if I had to do it in front of all the relatives. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. Leonard beamed when he saw me, enfolding me in a warm hug. "Callie, so glad you could make it," he enthused. "Can you believe I'm this old?" I smiled weakly, wishing I could actually focus on celebrating with him. But out of the corner of my eye I saw Marla across the lawn, a smug look on her face as she watched me. My stomach tightened. This was it. Time to face her venom. Drawing a shaky breath, I steeled myself and marched across the grass directly toward her. She raised one eyebrow as I approached, her expression cold. Before I could open my mouth, she grabbed a microphone off a nearby table, tapping it loudly to get everyone's attention. "Sorry to interrupt, but I have an important announcement about the guest of honor's daughter-in-law," she said loudly. Everyone turned, curiosity mixing with surprise at her imperious tone. "Callie here," she continued, glaring at me while gesturing theatrically in my direction, "has stolen over $200 from the family." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. I stood frozen, mouth agape, as all eyes fixed on me with disbelief and suspicion. My pulse pounded in my ears. "Marla, what is going on?" Eli demanded, rushing forward to stand between us. I blinked back grateful tears at the sight of my husband, though his forehead was etched with confusion. "Yeah, what the hell, Marla?" someone else shouted. A nervous murmur rippled through the guests. My knees shook as I grasped Eli's hand like a lifeline. Marla raised her palms, her eyes cold. "I received an anomaly notice from the family company's bank last week. When I investigated, I discovered systematic transfers from the business account straight into Callie's personal coffers." "That can't be true," I implored to the crowd, finding my voice. "I would never steal anything, especially not from family." "That's funny, because I have bank records showing otherwise," Marla spat. "And it didn't take much digging to realize the transfers coincided precisely with Callie's arrival." She crossed her arms smugly. Blood roared in my ears. This couldn't be happening. Eli squeezed my hand, brows furrowed. Clearly there's been some kind of mix-up. Let's sit down and look at these supposed records. I'm sure Callie can explain. A mix-up? Marla retorted. You really believe your wife over your own sister? The proof is right here in black and white. She waved papers in the air as indignant murmurs spread through the guests. My eyes flooded with tears. Was Eli really doubting me too? Hey, let's not make assumptions until we have all the facts, our cousin William interjected reasonably. Some family members mumbled agreement. Maybe the bank made an error? The bank didn't embezzle 200 grand. She did, Marla shouted, stabbing a finger at me. Several relatives nodded, casting suspicious looks my way. Mortified tears spilled down my cheeks. This couldn't be real. Suddenly, Leonard stepped forward, leaning heavily on his cane. Though frail, his voice rang clear. I know my daughter-in-law. Callie is innocent, he declared. A few family members applauded. My tears morphed to gratitude for my father-in-law's faith in me, though an anxious pit still churned in my stomach. What proof did I actually have? Marla only scoffed. You're a foolish old man to trust her over evidence. That gold-digging fraud married Eli for access to our accounts. An electric fury coursed through me. The stress, confusion, and Marla's public attacks ignited my anger. Yes, Marla clearly hated me, though I hardly knew her. But why make such drastic accusations? What was her end goal? Before I could respond, she snatched her cell phone from her fancy designer purse, stabbing aggressively at the screen. That's it, she snapped. I'm calling the cops. Fear and adrenaline surged through my veins. This harassment had gone too far. Just then, Eli grabbed Marla's phone from her hand, ending the call she had started. Marla's mouth dropped in indignation. A tense hush fell over the audience. I think we all need to take a beat and calmly gather the facts, Eli stated evenly, though I detected a slight tremble in his voice. He drew me close, and I clung tightly to him, struggling to control the sobs rising in my throat. Let's reconvene tomorrow after I've had time to carefully examine these bank statements, and Callie can explain her records, Eli continued. I'm confident we can resolve this without getting the police involved. I exhaled, beyond grateful for Eli's level-headed intervention. Maybe he did still believe in my innocence, after all. But as I glanced around at the circle of relatives, I only saw skepticism and distrust in their eyes. This ambush might just be the beginning of Marla's rampage, and I had to find a way to convince everyone of the truth before she destroyed my entire world. The war had only just begun. The next weeks crept by in agonizing slow motion. Marla's public accusations spawned whispers that plagued me each time I ventured into town. The hairdresser, the grocer, even our neighbors cast furtive glances my way. At home, tension crackled in the air. Eli burrowed himself reviewing reams of financial statements, desperate to reconcile the anomalies Marla uncovered. Though he tried to hide it, I spotted doubt flickering in his eyes whenever we spoke. Meanwhile, we had temporarily moved into Leonard's sprawling estate to care for him after his cancer diagnosis. But with each passing day under the same roof as Marla, the knot in my stomach tightened. She seized every opportunity to berate me, even slamming doors in my face. I jumped each time her shrill voice echoed down the cavernous halls. Leonard's health visibly deteriorated under the constant conflict until he stopped leaving his room at all. One evening, as I prepared Leonard's dinner tray, I overheard Marla's strident tones from the hall. I paused, a glass of orange juice frozen in my hand. Callie clearly convinced you to put her name on your will and give her healthcare power so she can manipulate your money while you're vulnerable from chemo, Marla accused. My mouth fell open in dismay. Were her attacks now extending to how I cared for my dying father-in-law? Really, Marla, must you always assume the worst about Callie? Leonard replied warily. I asked her to help me get my documents in order, because I trust her. You're making a huge mistake trusting that deceitful money-grabber over your own family, Marla retorted. I stormed down the hall before I even made the conscious decision, too incensed to hold my tongue a second longer. How dare you undermine how I care for Leonard, I confronted her, slamming the tray onto the table. Orange juice sloshed over the edge of the glass. Questioning my role as power of attorney when I've done nothing but dedicate myself to this family is despicable, even for you, I spat. Marla straightened to her full height, mere inches taller than my petite frame. But she seemed to tower over me now with righteous indignation flaming in her eyes. "You manipulated your way into this family's good graces with dew eyes and sweet talk, so you could get your hands on Leonard's fortune," she hissed, stepping toward me. "But you won't get away with it as long as I'm here protecting what's rightfully mine." Suddenly her accusations clicked into place with startling clarity. This had never been about me at all. It was about securing her own inheritance. My chest swelled with outrage. "Is that what this whole smear campaign is about?" I demanded. "Discrediting me so you get Leonard's money?" Marla scoffed. "It's only smear if it's not the truth. But go ahead, play the victim. We'll see who Leonard believes when I show him proof of your late-night cash withdrawals dopping straight into your personal shopping funds." My hands clenched at my sides, so that was her new angle? I had to nip this sabotage in the bud. "You planted bogus evidence to make me look guilty so you could wrestle away control," I accused. "Admit this is all a ploy before you cause real damage." Marla stepped forward until she loomed over me, close enough for me to smell her floral perfume. Her glare pierced my soul. "The only damage being done here is you bleeding my family dry through your deceit, but I will expose you, if it's the last thing I do," she vowed. A chill slithered down my spine at the cold conviction in her tone. She swept from the room before I could summon any defense. I sank into a chair, heart pounding against my ribs. This confirmed Marla wouldn't stop her personal vendetta until she achieved her nefarious goal. I had to act fast to protect myself and Eli from her intricate manipulations. But I feared too much harm had already been done. The web of lies she spun seemed too thick to permeate. If I didn't find a way to prove myself soon, I risked losing everything. My fists clenched with determination. I refused to let Marla win. Over the next week I became restless, unable to shake Marla's threat. Her web of lies seemed on the verge of choking the life from me and my marriage. I had to fight back. Late one night, after everyone else went to bed, I crept into Leonard's dusty home office. Moonlight filtered through the windows as I rifled through the heavy wooden desk. There had to be some record here of the family company's actual financial records I could leverage to defend myself. The air felt thick and oppressive as I sifted through endless papers by the dim glow of my phone flashlight. Dust motes danced through the thin beams like ghosts of the past. I suppressed a cough, anxious not to wake anyone. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, files blurring together in the darkness. Just when I was about ready to give up, a thick manila folder wedged at the back of a drawer caught my eye. I opened it carefully, immediately recognizing Leonard's distinctive scrawl. It appeared to be records detailing financial transfers related to an offshore company set up as a small tax shelter. Everything seemed perfectly legal at first glance, until I realized with a jolt that the shelter had recently been dissolved right before the accusations against me began. I scanned the documents feverishly, compelled forward by intuition. Pay dirt. Black and white records showing a significant cash deposit into a new account just before the offshore entity dissolved. My blood turned to ice as I saw the listed owner, Marla. Frantically, I shuffled through more records, eventually finding a bank statement detailing a 7-figure cash withdrawal from the family business's primary account, more than triple what I supposedly embezzled. It trickled into numerous smaller accounts before eventually accumulating in Marla's offshore fund. I rocked back onto my heels, hands trembling around the damning evidence. This proved without doubt that Marla had manufactured bogus accusations against me to conceal her own enormous theft. Fury coursed through me. Thanks to her tall tales, I endured weeks of public humiliation and deteriorating faith from my husband and father-in-law. Meanwhile, she was quietly siphoning enough money to set herself up for life. It made me physically ill. Just then, I noticed smaller subsequent withdrawals from the family accounts in the months since. My rage ignited exponentially when I realized the implications. Even after building her own offshore fortune, Marla continued bleeding the family funds dry out of pure spite and greed. By now, grief intermingled with my anger. Eli and I once shared dreams of taking over the struggling family business, restoring it to prosperity. But if Marla's embezzlement continued unchecked, bankruptcy loomed perilously close. We stood to lose everything because of her insatiable avarice. Well, not if I had anything to do with it. Foreboding determination solidified my resolve. I would protect this family from financial ruin, no matter the consequences. Carefully replacing the records, I crept back upstairs, nursing the glimmer of a plan. Yet, just as I reached my bedroom, muffled sobs gave me pause. I turned to see Eli slumped on our couch, face buried in his hands. My heart wrenched at his pain. I started to call out when he began speaking aloud in a broken tone. "I swore till death do us part," he choked. "But how can I protect our vows if I don't even know who I married?" My voice froze in my throat as his despair pierced my soul. He truly doubted me now, unsure what was illusion and truth after so many vicious lies. Vulnerable as a child, my formidable husband crumbled under the weight of Marla's schemes. I yearned to rush forward and wrap my arms around him, to reaffirm my loyalty and unwavering devotion so we could unite to defeat Marla's treachery. But my window to comfort Eli closed abruptly when Marla herself suddenly stormed from the shadows. "Don't torture yourself any longer defending that backstabbing fraud," she admonished him coldly. "I warned you Callie only cares about herself. Now let's discuss removing her from the will before she steals you blind too." I barely stifled my outraged gasp, shrinking back before Marla spotted me. Boiling fury overwhelmed any remains of sorrow. This confirmed Marla wouldn't stop her personal vendetta until she achieved her nefarious goal. It was time to turn the tables and make her pay. I refused to let her win. Morning dawned gloomy and gray, matching my mood. I wandered the garden, still reeling from the revelations of the previous night. Though fury continued simmering in my veins, one stark truth emerged. I couldn't defeat Marla alone. Her schemes created an impenetrable fortress no one dared question. No, to topple her web of lies, I needed reinforcements. I sank onto a cold concrete bench, formulating the kernel of a plan. A potential ally came to mind. Hazel? Leonard's estranged former assistant. She resigned in protests after Leonard overlooked her for a promotion in favor of Marla years before. Hazel's inside knowledge could prove invaluable ammunition. After digging around, I managed to track down her contact information. My hands shook slightly dialing her number that afternoon. "Hazel? It's Callie," I started tentatively when she answered. I took a deep breath. "I apologize for the out-of-the-blue call, but I desperately need your help." I expected hesitation or outright refusal, but Hazel readily agreed to meet at a quiet cafe the next morning. I arrived early the following day, nerves and anticipation roiling inside me. When Hazel entered right on time, bearing 2 steaming cups of coffee, I sighed in relief. This felt meant to be. Hazel's sharp eyes softened with sympathy as I unloaded the entire sordid tale. Her lips pressed thin at the mention of Marla's name. "I'm so sorry you got dragged into that family's dysfunction," she said, shaking her head. "When Leonard picked Marla over me for VP, I swore one day her greed would be her downfall." I leaned forward intently. "So you're not surprised by her embezzlement accusations?" Hazel scoffed. "Not one bit. She always resented Leonard's fortune while believing herself entitled to it. I tried warning him for years, but he remained blind to her self-serving nature." My pulse quickened. "So you believe she could be capable of setting me up?" I dared ask. Hazel nodded firmly. "Absolutely. She always despised perceived rivals. With you as a new threat, I guarantee she'd target you to get what she wants." Hope unfurled inside me, hearing Hazel validate my suspicions. Perhaps I wasn't battling Marla alone after all. I described finding records proving Marla siphoned family money overseas for years. Hazel confirmed witnessing odd financial transactions during her tenure, but hadn't pieced together the pattern at the time. "I knew something dishonest was happening right under Leonard's nose," Hazel revealed, anger glinting in her eyes. "But I never managed to catch concrete proof before Marla turned Leonard against me." My mind raced, connecting dots. With Hazel's inside context combined with the evidence I uncovered, we suddenly held all the puzzle pieces necessary to expose Marla's schemes. I met Hazel's determined gaze. "Will you help me convince Leonard and Eli of the truth?" I implored. "With our knowledge combined, we can finally prove Marla's been playing everyone this whole time." Hazel straightened, resolve stealing her expression. "I'm all in. Marla destroyed my career and reputation. It's time for some justice." We plotted late into the afternoon. Hazel agreed to discreetly dig for more evidence of Marla's embezzlement over the years. Meanwhile, I would pry deeper into the dissolved tax shelters, hopeful more clues awaited somewhere. It felt intoxicating, finally strategizing a counteroffensive. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Hazel grasped my hands, compassion in her eyes. "Stay strong, Callie," she urged. "With perseverance, the truth prevails. You'll restore your good name, I'm certain of it." I blinked back grateful tears as I embraced her. With Hazel by my side, the future seemed a little less bleak than the night before. I didn't have to withstand Marla's torment alone anymore. Empowered by new camaraderie, I drove home with my head held high, refusing to shed another tear over Marla's schemes. She spun an artful web to discredit me, yes. But united with Hazel, we would gather enough evidence to dismantle her lies once and for all. Justice would soon have its day. Over the next few weeks, Hazel and I discreetly gathered evidence. She uncovered financial statements showing odd transfers coinciding with Marla's promotions over the years. I dug deeper into the offshore accounts, tracing money trails leading right back to Marla. Piece by piece, our proof grew damning. Marla embezzled under the guise of legitimacy at every opportunity, bleeding funds to fuel her gilded lifestyle. Meanwhile, she schemed to undermine me, the lone barrier between her and total control. Armed with reams of records, Hazel and I decided to confront Marla and Leonard at the upcoming quarterly board meeting. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. I dressed carefully that morning in a polished sheath dress, armor for the battle ahead. Hazel met me outside the conference room, files clutched in her steady hands, eyes brimming with vindication. "Ready?" I asked with a bracing smile. She squeezed my arm encouragingly. We entered together as equals, spines straightened in solidarity. I held Marla's glare evenly as we took seats across the heavy oak table. Shock registered briefly on her haughty features at the sight of her old rival, but she quickly arranged her face in a patronizing smile. "Hazel, what an unexpected surprise," she purred, venom subtly lacing her syrupy tone. "I thought we parted ways years ago. But no matter." "I asked her to come," I interjected coolly, relishing knocking her off balance. "I want reliable witnesses for this discussion." Marla scowled as murmurs rippled around the room. Leonard rapped his gavel. "Let's begin, shall we?" Oblivious to the undercurrents, he led the meeting through standard business items. I barely listened, watching Marla fidget with her ostentatious jewels. She likely assumed I invited Hazel merely for emotional support. Well, she would soon learn otherwise. Finally, Leonard adjourned the budget approvals. "Any other items before we wrap?" he asked mildly. I met Hazel's gaze, stealing my nerve. "Showtime. Yes, actually." My voice rang clear in the sudden silence. All eyes shifted to me as I rose slowly, smoothing my skirt with a steady hand. I stepped forward, shoulders back, confidence rooting me firmly to the ground. Hazel handed me a document. I flipped it open, facing the group. "As you can see in this financial statement from a now dissolved offshore account, large sums consistently went missing from family company funds over several years." Murmurs swelled as I continued, laying out transfer records, holding nothing back. Piece by irrefutable piece, we outlined Marla's elaborate embezzlement scheme going back over a decade. By the time I slapped the last document on the table, you could hear a pin drop. I surveyed the room, vindicated by the appalled and stunned expressions. But Marla only scoffed, disrupting the taut silence. "Honestly, Callie, implicating me to distract from your own crimes is pathetic," she scolded. My fury spiked. How dare she still feign innocence with hard evidence stacked against her? But Hazel subtly shook her head before I could erupt. She was right. I had to stay calm and definitive for my case to convince. I folded my hands neatly. "The proof is all here. Hazel and I traced every withdrawal, every transfer authorized by your signature to siphon family funds." I speared Marla with an icy stare. "The only question is why, and how much more before you bankrupted us all?" A tense pause swelled. I glimpsed doubt flickering behind Eli's stoic expression. The others seemed to hold their breath, stunned by the unexpected drama. This was it, my one shot to break Marla's facade wide open. Suddenly, Marla shoved back her chair with an ear-piercing screech. "This is ridiculous!" She stabbed an accusatory finger my direction, every ounce of her composure vanishing. "That conniving fraud hunted through private records to falsely implicate me, and you're all blindly going along with it." She swiveled toward Leonard, features taut with desperation. Father, please, listen to reason. No, Leonard bellowed. We all jumped at his sudden ferocity. He rose slowly, knuckles white, where he gripped the table's edge. When he lifted blazing eyes to Marla, any hint of frailty burned away. It is you who has strayed from reason, he decreed. His gravelly voice resonated with conviction. The evidence is clear. You betrayed this family's trust for the last time. Marla's mouth opened and closed like a fish struggling for air. I watched, barely breathing, as her web of lies crumbled around her. You can't actually believe this absurd setup, she blustered, gaze darting wildly between us all. But she no longer appeared the commanding tycoon, just a desperate, broken woman with nowhere left to hide. The proof makes your guilt abundantly clear, Leonard pronounced. You drained company accounts we depended on to fund your extravagant shopping sprees, thinking no one would ever catch on. His voice dripped disgust. But justice doesn't sleep forever. But I was securing our future, Marla burst out, pointing a shaking finger at me. Little Miss Innocent was bleeding us dry behind your back. I had to take control. By robbing me blind? Leonard thundered. I jumped, stunned by his atypical fury. He advanced on Marla where she quailed against the wall. Your hubris and selfishness knew no limits, but no more. Spittle flew as he shouted. You are hereby stripped of all authority in this company, effective immediately. A chorus of astonished murmurs rippled around the room. My pulse pounded as his words sank in. We did it. We finally exposed Marla's web of deceit. She would face consequences at last. Marla gaped, skin fading to a ghostly pallor. For a split second, I almost felt pity for her distress. Then I remembered weeks of torment I endured thanks to her lies. No, she deserved every bit of this downfall. Justice was finally served. Suddenly Marla erupted again, venom blazing as she faced the stunned group. You fools! That backstabbing fraud deceived you all because she wants my birthright for herself. She jabbed a shaking finger at Hazel and I. These money-hungry snakes conspired to bring me down out of pure jealous spite, and you ate up every poisonous lie. She swiveled accusingly toward Eli where he sat stunned. Surely you won't let them dismantle our family, brother? She pleaded desperately. You know I would never betray you this way. All eyes shifted to Eli. He just stared, jaw clenched tight, assessing Marla like he'd never seen her before. I held my breath, realizing though I won the battle with evidence, Eli's faith in me still dangled by a fragile thread. If he sided with Marla now, her schemes might succeed, tearing us apart for good. After an endless pause, Eli slowly stood. Marla's lips parted hopefully. The room seemed to swelter in the tense silence. Finally, Eli stepped toward me, resolve etching his handsome features. He took my hands tenderly in his. Behind him, Marla released a shattered gasp. Forgive me for ever questioning your virtue, Eli implored, regret shining in his eyes. In one day, you proved yourself more honest and loyal than my own sister in a lifetime. Overwhelmed with relief, I let out a strangled sob. Eli pulled me into his strong embrace. I clung to him, tears spilling down my cheeks. Murmurs of approval rippled around us. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leonard place a gentle hand on Hazel's shoulder in gratitude, her lips curled into a satisfied smile. The tender moment broke abruptly with Marla's enraged shriek. You spineless fools! I sacrificed everything for this family! She grabbed wildly for a paperweight on the desk. I pulled Eli protectively behind me, but before Marla could hurl the makeshift weapon, 2 security guards burst through the doors, summoned by the receptionist after overhearing Marla's meltdown. They wrestled her away, still screaming threats and obscenities as she struggled violently in their grip. We all stood frozen, shocked by the deranged scene, as Marla was dragged away in handcuffs, spit flying, makeup smeared beyond recognition. The heavy doors swung slowly closed behind the guards, sealing her fate. Stunned silence swelled. It was over. My pounding heart gradually steadied as sweet relief coursed through me. I turned slowly to Eli, joy and gratitude welling inside me like a healing balm. With Marla gone, justice served and relationships mended, the future gleamed brightly for us all. In the weeks following Marla's dramatic downfall, the family company steadily regained its footing. With Marla gone and the missing funds recovered, hope cautiously reawakened for a prosperous future. Meanwhile, details emerged about Marla's schemes that made me ill. She not only embezzled riches into secret accounts, but took out exorbitant loans in the family business's name to fund her lavish globe-trotting lifestyle. No wonder insolvency loomed so close. With the extent of the betrayal clear, Leonard filed charges ensuring Marla answered fully for her crimes. The last we heard, she faced over a decade behind bars. I can't pretend I didn't feel some satisfaction hearing that news after all the damage she caused. On a personal level, Eli and I focused on rebuilding intimacy after so much erosion of trust. We took long evening strolls together, talking openly like newlyweds again. Eli even discussed taking on a larger leadership role in the company once more. Hearing his enthusiasm reawakened my hopes of one day standing proudly by his side as his partner. Meanwhile, Eli and Leonard welcomed Hazel back wholeheartedly upon realizing how invaluable her expertise could prove. They offered her an executive role, heading up financial operations, which she accepted with smug satisfaction. I didn't blame her for reveling in the moment. Marla denied her the credit she deserved for too long. As for me, when Eli asked what I planned to do career-wise now that the dust settled, I surprised myself with my answer. The idea came to me suddenly. Why not take my recent education in combating corporate fraud to help others? With some training, I could establish myself as an independent financial crimes consultant. So I enrolled in specialized college courses by day, while spending evenings discussing potential business strategies with Eli over home-cooked dinners. After so much turmoil, our household brimmed with possibilities for the future again. One sunny afternoon about 2 months later, relaxed laughter drew me out to the veranda where I discovered Eli and Leonard chatting animatedly over paperwork bearing the company logo. They both glanced up with easy smiles as I approached. "Pull up a chair, darling?" Eli greeted me vibrantly. "We were just discussing ideas for expanding the international sales division you proposed. Leonard thinks your concept shows real vision." I blinked, surprised and touched. He not only recalled that late-night conversation weeks ago, but took my ambitions seriously. Eli gently tugged me down between them. "With Hazel stabilizing finances, I can shift focus to strategic growth initiatives," he explained. "And I was hoping you might spearhead market research for Eastern European expansion." My brows shot up as I swiveled toward Leonard. He regarded me steadily over his glasses. "It was sharp thinking on your part to identify those emerging economies," he noted. "You have precisely the savvy and grit needed to pioneer new territory." I shook my head in wonder. In the depths of desperation mere months ago, I never imagined rising to such a critical role in the family company. But Hazel was right. Perseverance through hardship bore sweeter fruit in the end. "We make quite a team." Eli's eyes twinkled with affection as he lifted his glass. "To new beginnings." Leonard and I both echoed the toast, smiling as we clinked our glasses in unity again after so much division. Staring into their uplifted, hopeful faces, my heart swelled with joyful gratitude. Marla sought to destroy this family and all we built together out of petty jealousy. But ultimately, we emerged wiser and closer for having weathered the stormy test. As we sipped the sweet, chilled wine, a sense of peace descended over me. The future brimmed with light and possibility, personally and professionally. All was well again at last.